Welcome to another daily dose of Theological German, where a sentence a day keeps the dissertation detractors away. We are still on this book here, The Kingdom of God and Christendom, and we are on installment number 17. Actually, we've gone past our normal 15-episode plan because it's a longer excerpt that we wanted to deal with, and so I hope you've been enjoying it. Let's get started on today's. Okay, so he, that's your subject, first thing in the sentence. Always nice when they do that. Usually German puts some other adverb or something up there and throws things off, but here it's nice. He, that's referring to Ezekiel. You'll recall from yesterday's episode that we're comparing Ezekiel to other prophets, where other prophets kind of just look at the people as a whole. Ezekiel is much more concerned with the individuals that make up the people. With reference to the salvation event, he wants to know which particular people are going to participate in this, not just that the people are going to participate in it. So that's kind of the context here. So he, Ezekiel, can, and this is a modal auxiliary. It's the verb können, which means can or to be able to. And when you have a modal auxiliary, you should always expect then an infinitive verb to complement that modal auxiliary. And it's always going to come down at the end of the clause. So you look down here, you pick up lassen, to let or permit. And that's fine, except that lassen also will frequently be functioning like a modal auxiliary itself, which means it also needs an infinitive complement again at the end of the clause, but since it's already taken up the position at the end of the clause, then the complement for it is going to come immediately before, as close to the end as it can get. And so you have here teilhaben, meaning to participate or something like that. And so what the basic clause structure here is saying is he can let participate, or he can permit to participate, except now you're going to have adverbs and things that are going to totally change the kind of sense of what's being said, but that's your basic structure. So let's just take it kind of from the top with that structure and add in the rest of the parts of the sentence. So he can no longer simply permit them. This pronoun is referring back to the people that he sees as individuals. He can no longer simply permit them to participate in the calamity. Technically, this word would be translated visitation, but it's always used to talk about a kind of like divine visitation of wrath in a way. So it's really referring to the destruction. You kind of have a merism here, as you'll see. So he can no longer simply permit them to participate in the calamity and the restoration of the people. Rather, he must, and here you have another modal auxiliary. This is müssen, which is kind of a term of obligation. And so it also needs a infinitive complement, which you're going to find down at the end of the clause here, begreifen, which is going to mean something like to understand. So your basic clause structure for this second clause is he must understand. You'll notice that this infinitive, or sorry, this modal auxiliary is in second position because this is not a subordinate clause. It's an equal clause to the clause before, and this conjunction is kind of a conjunction that will often introduce a clause of equal status because it's making a contrast or comparison. So you kind of have these two equal clauses. And so that's why the verb is in second position. The subject, though, you kind of have to resupply from up here. It's been sort of elided, and so that's what I did. But anyway, so your basic clause structure, rather, he must understand, and then you can kind of fill out the rest of it. From there, he must understand what? The way in which they participate. So here you have a subordinate clause, a relative clause. So here's your relative pronoun, in which, that's going back to die Art, the way, in which, and so because it's a relative clause, it's subordinate, your verb ends up being all the way down here at the end. And so that's what that's doing down at the end of that clause, in which they participate. And then you have this da word, which you'll recall from the way I've handled this in the past. You could use a similar English word like therein, which is the same kind of technique in English for forming a compound that does this type of job. But you're probably here going to want to say in it. And this da is referring back to the visitation and the restoration. And so that's the thing that they're participating, and this relative pronoun here, just to use a different color, is picking up die Art. So you want to make sure you kind of know what's referring to what. There's a lot of different references happening in the sentence. So let's, there's a lot of ink there. Let's grab a different color and translate this back over from the beginning. Rather, he must understand the way in which they participate in it, that is the calamity and restoration, as willed by God. And here this gewollt is the verb wollen, meaning to will, or probably actually better, to desire, as desired by God. And it is a participle, past participle, which you know from this get prefix in particular. And that's just kind of a little adverbial phrase. It is kind of technically has a clause status because it does have a verb there, but it doesn't have like an indicative verb, and so it's a different kind of thing than a normal subordinate clause or something like that would be, and it simply modifies the understanding that we're understanding this as desired by God and not in some other fashion. As always, I hope you found that helpful. Please do like and subscribe and share with all of your Theological German friends, and we will see you next time.